Noel Hidalgo Tan, who received his PhD from the Australian National University and is a senior specialist in archaeology at the SEAMEO Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts in Bangkok. While his work puts him in contact with all aspects of archaeological work in this region, his particular expertise is in rock art of Southeast Asia. He has documented sites in Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Noel is managing editor of the SPAFA journal, and we're going to put the web address on later on, and runs the Southeast Asian Archaeology website, of which we're going to put the website on as well later on. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Noel for this wonderful presentation on Southeast Asian archaeology from rock art perspective.
Thanks, Gisela, and thank you everybody for the welcome. Everyone can see my screen, right? It's, just
yes, it's all working. Don't worry.
All right, great. Sorry. So yeah, thanks to the Friends of the Museum and to the Asian Civilizations Museum for hosting me this evening. Hello from Bangkok, where we are having life pretty much as normal here. I'm sorry to taunt you all, but I am in the office, so that's a rough patch for me. And shout out to all my friends who are here in this chat room. I'm really sorry to be not back at home in Singapore. So I would have loved to have given this talk in Singapore, but I'm quite happy to be giving this talk to all of you from friends around this world, around the world. I actually have a version of this talk that I've been using for the last 10 years. And you know, the basic introduction to Southeast Asian rock art. And it turns out that we have some of my lectures already up on YouTube. And so when the Friends of the Museum asked me to give this talk, I thought it would be a good time to overhaul this lecture. And so you could say that this lecture is still a bit same, but different. And now it's 75% different at least, I counted. And before I was coming from this perspective that rock art was a new and emerging research area. And that's what it was when I was talking about rock art for the last 10 years. But now it's a new decade. I figured I should give it a new spin. And I wanted to give a broad overview of how rock art is changing or understanding the past. And so I'll be featuring not just my research, but also research of my colleagues around the region as well. And I really want to show how rock art is changing our understanding of the Southeast Asian past. Gisela, well, before we start off, let's play a game. We're going to use the poll function in Zoom. We're not going to play Plants versus Zombies. We're going to play a game called Elephants versus Buddhas. I'm going to show you a close-up of some rock art images, and you're going to tell me if this is an image of an elephant or if it's an image of the Buddha. So we'll do a trial run. Let's run the first poll. Is this an elephant or is this a Buddha? So let's show the poll.
Okay, I put it up. Let's give everyone 30 seconds or so. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see. All right. Ooh, 15.
Okay.
A lot more people thinking it's elephant than a Buddha.
Oh, it's a tricky one. I'm not sure which one I would say. Hmm.
3, 2,
okay.
1. All right. So we have.
And I'll share the results.
63% thinking it's an elephant and 37% thinking it's a Buddha. For those who thought it was a Buddha, you are wrong. This is indeed an elephant. It's called Tam Chang. It's a site in Udon Thani, and of course, Chang is the Thai word for elephant, charm beers, named after the elephant. All right, let's do a second one before we get on to the lecture proper. Is this an elephant or is this a Buddha? Let's do 20 seconds.
Coming in
a lot of people think it's a Buddha this time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll end it there.
All right. So more people think it's a Buddha. So if you thought that this was the Buddha, you are wrong. This is an elephant. So this is an elephant from the Kanam site in Cambodia. And Kyle Latinas, who was, I think, a speaker the last time, he investigated this site. I think some of you thought that the long legs and the tail were the fingers. Right? It was a bit sneaky there. We'll have a couple more of these as we go along. But so let's talk about rock art. Now, Southeast Asia isn't very well known for rock art, and Gisela was just remarking to me before we started that, yeah, well, we don't really hear a lot about rock art in Southeast Asia. When you think about rock art, you think about cave paintings, you probably think about the ones that are in France and Spain. So left to right, the ones in Chauvet, Altamira in Spain, and Lascaux. And these are spectacular sites. They range between 17,000 years, that's the one from Lascaux, to about 37,000 years in Chauvet, the one on the left. And we call them, it's been called the birthplace of art. So for the longest time, this has been the oldest figurative art in Southeast Asia. That is true until last year when Indonesia, we have a painting that's 43,900 years old. And this is 43,900 years old, which is a minimum date, so it could be older. This discovery was all over the news last year. You might have seen it, and this is probably one of the reasons why Mary asked me to give a talk about this particular site as well, and what it means for the region. I used to say that rock art is a relatively new area of research in Southeast Asia. And that is actually true for the world. Rock art is pretty new for the study of archaeology in general. The first European rock art sites were discovered in 150 years ago. So in 1879, the Altamira site was discovered. Actually wasn't believed to be true when it began, and then in the early 1900s, and then we started getting more and more cave sites in France, and then people started accepting the idea that, oh, actually, yes, there is in fact a Paleolithic site. And Chauvet Cave, the one that has the 37,000-year-old date, was actually discovered very recently, only in 1994. Now, in Southeast Asia, believe it or not, the first mention of rock paintings in Southeast Asia also comes from 1879. In fact, they come from the Batu Caves in Malaysia. So some of you might have been to the Batu Caves. This is a picture I took in Busan a few years ago. One of the caves in the bottom of the cliff had black drawings done by the indigenous people who were living in the area. They don't exist anymore, but a mention of them. We did have rock art found in Indonesia, Myanmar, and Thailand, and they were mentioned very early on. And what's true for the field in general is that the research has accelerated pretty much in the last 30 years. So last year we had the old hunting scene from Sulawesi, but that was only just discovered last year. And a lot of the early research on rock art treated rock art as art, or just treated, really focused on the images. And so we were asking questions about how old was this art? who made this art and what does this art mean. So how old is this art? This is not from a rock art site. This is from a movie. This is from the movie Prometheus by Ridley Scott. And it's the opening scene. You may have seen it before, but it's an opening scene. The archaeologists enter a cave, and then they look at this painting and they say, oh, it's 34,000 years old, which never happens in real life. In fact, it is impossible. We cannot look at a rock painting and tell how old it is immediately. So anyone who looks at a painting and says how old it is, probably quite suspicious. In fact, the vast majority of rock art in Southeast Asia is not dated. Most sites are older than local memory. And in Thailand, most sites are defaulted to around 2,000 to 4,000 years old. It's kind of like a fallback time period. So you'll find in Thailand especially, oh, you find a rock art site, it's probably 2,000 to 4,000 years old. It's like a default thing for local archaeology. Rock art is really hard to date by themselves. They mostly have no carbon to date. When they do have carbon to date, they're not very long lasting because carbon paints actually don't last for more than 100 years. So you don't get very accurate dates anyway because they're in the open, and so they degrade quite fast. And a lot of times rock art is dated through iconography or through associated artifacts. So in Thailand, the 2,000 to 4,000 year old dates is usually attributed to the fact that, oh yes, there's stone tools in this area. Not necessarily meaning this site, like say in the same province or in the next province, and therefore rock art is 2,000 to 4,000 years old. So the pictures that I have here are actually pictures of dated rock art. They're dated by a direct dating, so like the ones in, let's see, the ones in Borneo, this is about 37,000 years old. And this space from East Timor is dated to about 11,000 years old. And they're dated by a technique called uranium series, where you detect the ratio of uranium in the limestone. So you can only use it when there's limestone present. The ones on the bottom left, the Patalim Cave, Myanmar, is about 7,000 years old, and that's based on the fact that there is stone tools in the cave and there are lumps of ochre, so the red pigment that they use in the same area, in the same level. And Bantasi, which was only found 4 years ago in Lampang in Thailand, northern Thailand. There are a couple of sites here. They have excavated the bottom of this cliff, and there are burials and there are stone tools, and they are dated to about 10,000 years old. So the archaeologists at the sites don't think that the rock art is 10,000 years old, but I would not be surprised if the rock art is. So as you can see, we have a default setting of 2,000 to 4,000 years old, but when we do have dates, they tend to be much older than we think, and when we, if they're recent, they tend to be much more younger than we think. Now, who made these rock art? In most cases, we don't actually know. There are few, if any, descendant communities in Southeast Asia that can say, that can claim the rock art. Southeast Asia has a very mobile community, so it's not uncommon to find that a village has been in the area for the last 100 or 200 years. So there's a lot of mobility among people in Southeast Asia. There aren't many communities who say that these are our rock art. They don't claim it like, say, the indigenous Australians do. On the left, this is a site that I was working on in Udon Thani. There was a piece of rock art over here on this site. It's very near a Buddhist shrine on the other side of this boulder. And so we spoke to the monk who was in the nearby monastery, and he was telling me the history of his monastery. Oh, we've been here for 1,000 years, and so we've established our monastery, and we've got a little shrines in this area. And so I asked him about the rock art in this shrine, and then he looks at me and says, what rock art are you talking about? He didn't know that they had rock art in one of the shrines. So I don't know whether he genuinely didn't know, or whether people came and it wasn't part of the site's history. In the middle, we have a so-called portrait of PDR Williams Hunt. He was a colonial officer in the 1950s. He was in charge of Aboriginal affairs in Malaya. And he had gone out to meet some indigenous Malayans, that's the right term. They were the Lano Negritos in Perak. And he had recorded the rare instance where they had actually drawn something in front of him, and what they drawn was a picture of him. Unfortunately, we don't know where this cave is anymore. It would be great to see if it's still around, but this is probably one of the only recorded instances of someone observing a group of people creating rock art in Southeast Asia. And on the right, this word Amber Sibui is a name in West Papua. Some people in West Papua say that the rock art in their area were created by Amber Sibui, and Amber Sibui means aliens. So I'm not saying there was aliens, but some of the rock art images, which unfortunately I don't have images of them, they do look like little gray men. They do look like the proverbial aliens. But that's an example of rock art being so far behind in time that people now don't know where they came from. And then the last question, the $1 million question, is what does it mean? And what does it mean can mean what is the rock art supposed to portray, or what is the authors trying to convey? And in many ways, this is the impossible question. It's the sort of going back in time and observing the events and understanding what they were doing. We'll never be able to answer this question. So it's always a matter of identifying what's there and interpreting what the rock art may have meant to convey. And most of the times, these are just guesses, speculations. So we've been playing this game called Elephant of Buddha, right? And here, this is plainly an elephant, but I'm sure some of you, especially people who have been guiding the museums, you probably already know that in fact, the elephant is sometimes the symbol of the Buddha. So it could be both. It could be the elephant who is the Buddha. And in this side, it's quite a possibility because this painting is also inside some other white paintings that are typical Buddhist motifs. So you have the goose, the peacock. And it's also very near a Buddhist temple. So the story of this side is that people will come to this side and shower before they enter the temple. This site on the right here, Tamwa, Mua means cattle or buffalo. It's not very far from this site. They're in the same hill, actually. The questions about this site is whether these are cattle, cows, or buffalo. There's an argument that this hump over here, so it might be a buffalo or a bunting. There are a few species of local bovids, on whether they are wild animals or whether they are domesticated animals. And the best we can say is that they're bovid figures. I tend to be very generalistic about animal description. So, I'll call them buffalo, but I'll call them bovids. On the bottom left is an interesting site. You can see a bunch of handprints, some people with feelers, and a four-legged animal. The head can't be seen anymore. This is a site that I studied in Laos. I managed to find a local who lived in the area. He said that his grandfather knew about this site, and he knew about the story from his grandfather, who knew about the story from his grandfather's grandfather, so his great-great-grandfather. And they said that the story about this site was that it's in front of a hunting ground, and people would catch animals in the forest, and after a successful hunt, they would come down and they would leave their handprints with the animal's bloods on the cliff face. So I don't know whether it's a hunting scene or a celebration ritual, and there's more to this site which I will show later. So keep this in mind. We'll come back to this particular site in a bit. And then the last site is this star globe design from East Timor. We don't know what it is, and I'm not saying it's aliens, but there are hundreds of paintings that are similar in the sense that they obviously have some sort of cultural significance, but we may never know what the significance is. These star designs are found across sites in Eastern Indonesia. And in archaeology, we basically call it abstract designs. We say abstract when we say anything that we can't identify readily. So the three questions of rock art as art is basically unanswerable, which is why looking at rock art was thought to be highly unfruitful or really undesirable path of research. But it's more useful to look at rock art as archaeological artifacts. So rather than comparing a rock painting to the Mona Lisa, it might be more useful to compare the rock paintings to the Belitung era. In many ways, the way you study a ceramic is the same way and give you the same kind of insight to the past than you do with rock painting. So, you know, it's like studying the dragon era just based on the imagery of the dragon, but we can also better contextualize the Yar or the Belitung shipwreck, or where it was manufactured, how it was made, and where it was going. And so looking at rock art, beyond just imagery, we can think about distribution of rock art sites, the production process, styles and typical forms that you find in rock art. In the region, and you do find that they sometimes cluster in regions. So, you know, I've been talking about rock art mainly as rock carvings and cave paintings, but I really like to expand this definition of rock art as really human-made markings on natural landscape. So pictograms are basically rock art that you create by adding stuff onto the rock. Petroglyphs are rock art that you create by removing rock, but also other rock art forms like megaliths and stone arrangements. So shout out to Stephen Murphy, who studied this site in Cambodia. This is a small Sema stone. They are small Buddhist boundary markers, and I would consider them in the corpus. But then geoglyphs, which you don't really have much of, but probably the most famous geoglyphs in the world are, say, the Nazca Lines, which can be seen in space. We have some in Southeast Asia, a few, but they're temporary generally, and not very well studied. And also, so when we talk about rock art in general, we have depictions of mainly abstract designs that we can't understand. But we also have human figures, animal figures, which are quite common. And for some reason, the animal figures always tend to be domesticates or prey, never predator animals. So you don't see rock paintings of tigers for some reason, or at least nothing that we can identify specifically as a tiger. They always tend to be deers and pigs. I mean, elephants are not exactly predators, they're just large herbivores. And then you have also religious art is quite common in later periods. Most painting sites or drawing sites are red color. Red is most common and generally older than black. In most instances, I think in all instances, we find that black is always superimposed on red rather than the other way around. And you have a very small percentage of other colors, so white, green. Those are very rare, and they tend to be much more recent. And also new rock art sites are found every year. So maybe last month you may have read around the region newspapers about a rock art site in Phuoc Chuak in Thailand that was found. And just last week, they announced in southern Thailand 5 more new rock art sites found around Phang Bay. So literally, there are new sites found every year. And it is a challenge sometimes to make a quick recording of them. So before I talk about the archaeology, we'll run another poll. Is this an elephant or is this a Buddha? Can we bring up the poll, please? All right, let's give 30 seconds.
Sure.
Now everyone's worried about what kind of trick I'm pulling, right? It's quite even now, elephant, but it's quite...
Oh yeah, it is very even. Okay.
Slightly more to Buddha, 4, 3.
I'll end it there.
All right, so slightly more people thought that this was a Buddha, and just slightly less people thought it was an elephant. So if you thought that this was an elephant, you are correct. And this is the Batu Gajah from South Sumatra. So this is an example of a megalith as well as a petroglyph. Right? So it's basically a large stone that's carved in the shape of an elephant. And you have a man who is seems to be carrying a keris, a dagger, or maybe even a sword. Yeah, really large. And he's holding what has been described as a dongson drum. So this site is undated. It's definitely Metal Age. So in the early part of the first millennium. So let's talk about the archaeology of Southeast Asia and how does rock art contribute to our understanding of the past. And I've roughly put it out in 4 main themes: migration, sacred landscapes, cultural interactions, and zooarchaeology. And I'll talk about some research that our colleagues have been doing in the region, and I'll talk about some of the things that I've been interested in as well. Also, these are the things that I've been playing with in my mind and long-term projects that I've been developing. I'm gonna take you through a tour of space and time. We're gonna go to the deep past, and then we're gonna go all around Southeast Asia as well. So I know everyone's stuck at home because of COVID. So hopefully this will give you a nice virtual tour of the region. So let's start at the very beginning. And at the very beginning, I mean the very beginning when modern humans started to appear in Southeast Asia. This is a question that our colleagues in Australia are very interested in, because we know that by around 50,000 years, modern humans were already in Australia. So the oldest site is in New South Wales, Willandria, 45,000 years old. And then a few years ago, there was a site called Majabebe, with controversial sites of 66,000 years old. I think there is still some debates about this site because some of the taphonomy and the site formation process has not been properly. So for now, we'll say that humans did appear in Australia by 45,000 years and already down south in 45,000 years. So we know up here would be a little younger than that. Now, on the mainland, in Southeast Asia itself, the archaeological evidence is quite consistent. We do have really old sites, about 60,000 years in Laos, Tampaling, and Lidah Ayah in Sumatra. And then slightly younger, you have about 40,000 years, the Tabon caves and the Nia skeleton in Sarawak. So we have good evidence for humans in Southeast Asia before humans being in Australia. What's really puzzling for the entry into Australia is that you can walk pretty much the way down south, but once you get to this area between the dotted lines, you have to cross the sea. And these are not just island hopping where you could just hop into the next island within sight. Some of these island hops are a lot further than 16 kilometers away. So you go out to sea and you would not see another island ahead of you. You would not know where you are going when you go out to sea. And so our colleagues have been in Australia are wondering specifically which routes did people take on the way down to Australia. And it seems to be that there are two main ways that one could go to Australia on foot and by short boat trips. These are proposed by Shimona Keeley in her doctoral work. Two likely routes from Southeast Asia to Australia. The northerly one comes down Peninsular Malaysia, Sumatra, and then cuts east into Borneo, Sulawesi, North Maluku, the bird's head of Papua. Then from there, you would go down this way to Australia. And then the southern route goes down Sumatra, goes to Java, Nusa Tenggara, and then Flores. And then you could go up through the throat of the bird and then down this way, or you could go down this way straight. This I'm a little bit more skeptical about this route because it is about 700 kilometers straight down. There's no landfall to begin. And early estimates based on demography would estimate that your initial colonizing population would be about 1,000 people in order to start having a viable population colonize Australia. So there are two proposed ways for people, for early men to get to Australia. And what do the early rock art sites in Southeast Asia show? So the early dates, the one that come from around 40,000 years ago, appear in Kalimantan and appear in South Sulawesi. And so they seem to favor the northern route. So it seems likely that the rock art evidence is consistent with this northern route way. And then this point number 10, this Yenahara site from East Timor has a date of 24 to 29,000, but there's a big asterisk because we may not, it's not known if this site is, this day is actually a rock art fragment or not. It comes from a fragment of a painting where the rock art on top is dated to no more than 6,300 years, so it's very young, relatively young. And then there's another layer of painting behind that, that is possibly another painting, and that is a 24,000-year-old. So that may be another indication of southern races. Certainly, most likely people were walking down and populating this entire area, but the evidence seems to suggest, seems to support the northern routes to Australia. We also suggest that in the next few years, we will find rock art sites in the northern Moluccas and in Kalimantan, this part of Kalimantan, and in Papua that might have comparable dates to the ones in Sulawesi. So, you know, I'm pretty sure that there will be new sites to be found. Now let's move forward a few thousand years. Oh no, wait, before that. So the other big implication about the rock art sites in Sulawesi is that there are rock art sites in island Southeast Asia that are 40,000 years old. What are the chances that they have sites in mainland Southeast Asia? So the problem with the dates in mainland Southeast Asia, like the ones from Myanmar and the ones from Thailand, is that they're all dates based out of associated finds in the cave. Don't have direct dates on rock art sites in mainland Southeast Asia. And my guess is that hopefully someday someone soon will come and find sites in mainland Southeast Asia that supports this. That shows that rock art in, say, Thailand or Myanmar is 50,000 years old. That would not be surprising, and that would be consistent with the evidence that we have so far. that's the other important implication about these sites. So these three sites, again, this is from Borneo, 37,000 years. Yang Tim Pusing in South Sulawesi, actually has two dates. The handprints is dated to 39.9 thousand. Then this area here of the pig is 35,000. And then this site from South Sulawesi again is 44,000. Now we fast forward another few thousand years, and when we talk about another mass migration into Southeast Asia, this time from the Austronesian speaking dispersal of peoples, most likely from Taiwan. So right around 5,000 years ago, we had a migration of people from probably Taiwan, maybe South China, down to the Philippines, and then to the rest of Southeast Asia. And they brought with them, they spoke an Austronesian-based language, so the parent language of Malay, Bahasa, Filipino, and they brought with them sailing technologies because they were excellent sailors. They had outrigger canoes, and they merged with the local populations. They brought with them wetland agriculture, rice agriculture, pigs and dogs, a whole suite of technological advances. And you can see in probably not one event, but several events that happened over a long period of time. But these events also have archaeological signatures. So, for example, the ones that went to the east towards the Pacific, we have what we call the Pita pottery. It's a very distinct kind of stamped dentate pottery with swirls. And you find them all across East Papua, Melanesia, down that way, down the east. Then to the west, we find a tradition of jade manufacture, pendants, and earrings, and these called Ling Ling O. And what's interesting about these artifacts is that all the jade seems to come just from Taiwan, but they are found across all over this region. So you find in Malaysia, southern Vietnam, in Thailand, in Borneo, and the jade only comes from one source in Taiwan. So there's this movement of people that can be traced to one particular material source. And then down in the south, in the eastern Indonesian islands, we have a cluster of paintings that are attributed to this Austronesian spirit too. They're called the Austronesian painting tradition. So the ones in white are actually clusters of rock art, 10 or more around this area, and they share a certain cluster within this area. But the ones in red have very similar characteristics. They're mostly coastal sites, red painting sites, and they are associated with areas of Austronesian speaking populations. They're on cliff faces, on rock shelters facing the sea, and they depict boats or metal implements like dongtong drums or axes. And they also have the star design, like the ones that we see from East Timor. So star design here, star designs here, star designs here. So the current understanding for this Austronesian painting tradition is that they are a localized tradition within the eastern Indonesia, within the Banda Sea area. And they must have spread very fast, obviously by boats in this area, just localized in this area too. But also, rock art is not just about prehistoric archaeology. So there's, because rock art is always found in caves or in rock shelters, there is a common perception that only people who were hunter-gatherers or cavemen just rock art. But caves are only just one type of landscape context that we find rock art in. We have in Thailand, a class of rock art that is the historical period. So Hindu Buddhist sites, these are the Khmer period, these are both Khmer sites. And then in my past, I've researched rock art as sacred landscapes as well. So we have, I've been looking at religious shrines that later become, rock art sites that later become religious shrines. So we have in these areas, we have a rock art site, this shrine, the rock art is located here. And it seems to suggest that it's not about the rock art that makes the space sacred, but the fact that these are good habitation sites, that adds into the site's attractiveness or their power. And cave sites are not the only sites that have historical rock or religious rock art. People know the Kabalstein paintings in Siem Reap. They're famous because of the Siem Reap River. You've got the Vishnu carvings and then the River of the Thousand Lingers, which is meant to make the waters holy and then infuse the holy power into the fields below. And then on the Mekong River, we have a similar site just south of Wat Pu. This site is only visible in April. It's an elephant here. These are Vishnu and Brahma statues. And there are also little post holes down here which are meant to put little Shiva lingers. So there is the same intention here to make the Mekong a very holy site. And this site is usually flooded. You can only see it in a very dry April. And the real takeaway about this site is that rock art is as much about the landscape as it is about the images. There's also a perception that we move from the mountains into the cities. So we have a very nice story about how we cave dwellers, we built stone tools, and then we had agriculture and built settlements, and then we had religion, and then we developed into full-fledged civilizations. And so our archaeology of the region is really an archaeology of the lowlands as much as less so about the highlands. In Singapore, we have this saying called swapu, right? The mountain turtle, someone who's uncivilized or uncouth. And that comes from this very ancient idea that, we are ancestrally unsophisticated people that come from the mountains. But more recent work from Scott and Acabado, for example, have shown that in more recent history, people actually moved back into the mountains to escape the control of the state. This Jar burial site from Cambodia, which is interesting. The jar burial sites are from the 15th century, and they're trading jars that were manufactured in Thailand. So they were, even though they lived in remote mountains, they were part of an international, they had access to the international trade. And these are the same people who were in that elephant cave site in Cambodia. So this site is actually linked to elephant trappers and the deerskin trade of the 15th and 17th centuries. And this site is also home to a nature spirit. So local people come to pray to the spirit twice a year. So it's also a sacred landscape. So it ticks all the boxes that I've been talking about recently. We have farming scenes in a cliffside. So we don't know whether these are people observing agriculturalists or agriculturalists coming to paint themselves. And margins don't only just mean mountains, they can also mean the seasides. So we have in Krabi, this cave site with over 80 paintings of ships, Thai ships, Chinese junks, Malay boats, and European ships. And we have, so speaking of Europeans, we have encounters with Europeans reflected in the rock art. So we have a steamship in Laos. It's an interesting history of how steamships came up the Mekong River, and also famous incidences where steamships carrying Buddha sculptures sunk into the Mekong River. Shout out to Veronica Walker, who worked with me on this site. The early 20th century, we have rock paintings of a car in Europe, in Perak. So not a very well-drawn picture of a car, but a car nonetheless, 4 wheels and a person inside. And also we have vandalism, which has some cultural value, even though it's undesirable. It's still a man-made marking in the landscape, and so it has some historical value. James Lowe, who's a colonial officer in the early 19th century, wrote about archaeological sites. And in fact, this site has an Indian Sanskrit inscription right on top here. And Colonel James Lowe decided to leave his name there, and now it's part of history. These writing is left by the Pao people, an ethnic group in the Shan state. And in some instances, they left a date behind. So we have a date from 1872 and 1903. So these writings are over 100 years old. They talk about how this villager was here and how this villager loved this other villager. And then this picture of the Nyan cat, which is really interesting because a Nyan cat, if you don't know what it is an internet meme from 2011. The Nyan cat. So hundreds of years from now, archaeologists will be able to go back and say, oh yes, this comes from 2011. Super rare. We can never even say that we have paintings down to a certain year back in the day when we still worship. That's it, I should say. Please don't vandalize rock art sites. In most cases, it's illegal, but if you do decide to please leave a date. Please make sure to leave a date so that it makes my job much easier. We'll talk about animals. I've talked about how difficult it is to look at animals, but we can also look at animal paintings as rock art sites that are filled with hunting scenes and fishing scenes. So that site, that massive site with the celebration handprints, it's actually located on a cliff face over the river. It's not actually an easy place to get to. And along with this site, you find paintings like these, but not just of hunting, but you also find paintings of boats and tame animals on the boats. So I'm going to be running out of time, so I'm going to quickly move to a certain slide. All right, I'm gonna very quickly pass through certain sites in Southeast Asia. So sites in Southeast Asia that you can come to visit. All right. So in Vietnam, these are sites that you can visit in Lao Cai province. In the Philippines, the Angono petroglyphs, the Phu Prabat Historical Park in Thailand, the Painted Cave in Nia, and of course for everyone in Singapore, the Singapore Stone is technically a rock art site. It is an inscribed boulder that used to sit in the mouth of the Singapore River. And it was filled with Sanskrit carvings or Pallava carvings, which was blown up. So it's no longer a rock art site, but it's a fragment of a rock art site. So that's coming to the end of my talk. But before we finish, we will do one last poll. Now, is this an elephant or is this a Buddha?
"30 seconds, everyone."
Oh, everyone thinks it's a Buddha. All right, I think we'll cut it at 20 seconds. Everyone seems to think it's a Buddha.
20 seconds, I'm gonna stop it there.
So 85% of you think it's a Buddha, and obviously you've not been listening to me. I'm very tricky this one. This is neither an elephant nor a Buddha. This is Ganesh. So that's my quick tour of these rock art sites in Southeast Asia. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everything that I had hoped to, but I think I've given you quite a lot. So maybe you have some time to take some questions.
Yep. All right. So thank you very much for this wonderful talk and all the rock carvings which weren't Buddhas.
Yeah, I never actually showed a Buddha.
Yeah, that's right. Which brings me to one of the questions which was asked. Since the rock carvings generally over 4,000 to 40,000 years old, it would be highly unlikely to have a rock carving of a Buddha.
Yes, no. So the religious rock carvings are always typically from the last 2 millennia when Buddhism and Hinduism first came into form.